Hi, welcome to Personality. This is updated for 2024. Let's get started. Okay, so what do we mean by personality? Personality is basically what is it about us that is consistent as we get older, or not as we get older, but as major life changes happen to us. For example, if you were to go to a high school reunion 20 years after you graduate, would people come up to you and say, man, you haven't changed one bit? Or would people say, wow, your personality has totally changed? If you won the lottery, a big lottery like $300 million, would that change you? Well, according to personality psychologists, the answer is no, you would not change much. Think of it this way: if you're an introvert and you won the lottery, or your dog dies, or something bad happens to you, or something really good happens to you, are you going to be an extrovert all of a sudden? Probably not. And that's true with other personality traits. It's about consistency. Okay? It's what makes you different than other people. And that doesn't really change much. Okay? Now, the trait approach. Now, there are different perspectives of psychology. And, we're going to go over some of them. I could think of three of them that we're going to go over. One of them that we're not going to go over, not the humanistic perspective. Trait psychologists, what they like to do is they like to study like which traits are durable, which traits are measurable. Okay. Um, and so what they do is they find traits and then they measure these traits in people, and then they try to see if these traits are consistent throughout the lifespan. Okay, and there is a problem. Some traits are situational, not permanent. That is a big issue because there are some, let's say, an introvert. Some introverts will go to work and they will be very social at work, but at home they're very reserved. So it makes you just wonder, what is introversion? Is it real? It's hard to tell. I mean, but that's what trait psychologists look at. So I hope you have taken this test already. Just Google out of service Big Five and you'll get it. There's the website. It's got like a lime green background. Just take it and then come back here. Okay. All right. Now, this is very important for the class. Write the red down. So, if I were going to give you a personality test or an intelligence test or something, I would want to know this: is it reliable? What do I mean by that? Let's say I give you an IQ test when you're 5 years old and give it to you again when you're 7. Would I get the same thing? Same thing with a personality test. If I gave you the Big Five at age 16 and then gave it to you again next year, would you get a totally different result? If the answer is no, then the test is not reliable. Now you're thinking, but wait a minute, what if the person has changed? Well, we assume that IQ doesn't change much, and we assume that personality doesn't change much. So the Big Five is considered a reliable personality test. And by the way, the IQ test is a reliable test of intelligence. However, now that just means if you take the test again and again, you get the same results. However, validity means, is the test worth a darn? Is it worthwhile? Okay. What if I gave you a personality test and I asked you something like, would you rather read a book or go to a party? And when you're a teenager, the answer is, hell yeah, I want to go to a party. Even introverts like to go to parties. So, what I'm saying with a question like that, it makes the test not valid. If you answer, I would rather go to a party than read a book, and then the test responds, oh, you must be an extrovert. Wrong. Even introverts like to go to parties. So that means that if a personality test were to ask you a question like that, then that means it's less than 100% valid. Meaning, does the test measure personality? The IQ. Is the IQ test a valid test of intelligence? Well, to some extent it is valid, but it does leave out a few things. Like the ability to put together an IKEA furniture. I mean, that seems like that should fit in there somewhere, but the IQ doesn't measure that very well. The SAT is not perfectly valid because some students score medium on it and then they go on to college and do very well in college. So the SAT is not a perfectly valid predictor of college success. So reliable means do you get consistent results? Validity is the test worth a darn? Is it any good? Okay. All right, moving right along. All right, write these down. I'm not going to read this to you. You also took the Big Five test and you read the results. So, extroversion. If you score high on extroversion, that means you're outgoing, you have lots of friends, you talk a lot, you agree with the saying, the more the better. But if you score low on extroversion, you're more reserved, maybe shy, you have fewer friends, probably closer friends, but maybe not. I don't know. And that's what we would mean by a low score in extroversion. So you're basically an introvert if you score low on that. Agreeableness. If you score high on agreeableness, you're easy to get along with. You don't complain a lot. Altruistic is a word you need to know. Altruism, the noun version, means are you charitable? Do you give good hugs? Do you laugh with people? Do you help old people cross the street? That's altruistic or altruism. If you score low on agreeableness, then you're difficult. You complain a lot. You get uncomfortable easily. You don't deal with change very well. Now, if you're thinking, oh man, I scored low, I'm just an awful person, don't think that way. Because people who score low in agreeableness, they're the kind of people you need to be around to protect you from bad things. They're the people who will stand up for you when the waitress brings you the wrong order. Okay, so don't knock yourself if you score low in agreeableness. Conscientiousness. If you score high, you got a strong work ethic, attention to details. When you clean a bathroom, do you actually mop behind the toilet? If so, you are high conscientiousness. You also have high character. You're less likely to cheat on your girlfriend or your boyfriend. If you score low, you're tardy, you take shortcuts, you're not a very hard worker necessarily. You're not as well organized either. Neuroticism. Usually you hear this in the adjective form, neurotic. Dude, you're being neurotic. If you score high, in neuroticism, you tend to have what are called negative emotions. Emotional instability, anxiety, moodiness, irritability, and sadness. And if any of those emotions are to an extreme, you may have a mental illness. So if your friend is acting obnoxious, you're like, dude, you're being neurotic. If you score low on neuroticism, you're kind of chill, not a lot of drama with you. And finally, openness to new experience. If you score high, you're willing to try new things, go to new places, you're imaginative. So I always like to ask my students, have you ever eaten Indian food? and most students have not at my school. Or I ask them, or how about this? Imagine someone from Minnesota goes to Texas and they're trying Tex-Mex for the first time, but instead they just order a burger at a Mexican restaurant because they don't want to try new things. Then they would have a low score in openness. Now, having a low score is not the worst thing in the world because sometimes at parties, some random person will come up to you and say, dude, take this pill. And someone who's low in openness might say, oh, hell no, I'm not taking drugs from a stranger. But someone with a high score might take the drug. Something to think about. Also, I want you to be familiar with the term five-factor model. And keep in mind, trait psychology. Trait psychologists study the big five, or the five-factor model. They say that basically there are 5 personality traits, and they leave off a bunch of others like religiosity. How religious are you? Mentally organized. They leave out a lot of stuff. All right, so in this case, do you think April, that girl, is low extroversion or high extroversion? All right, she would be more low extroversion. Her character is more introverted. This is Sheldon from Big Bang Theory. Notice his t-shirt is ironed. Is he low in agreeableness? Is he like Squidward? Or is he high agreeableness? Somebody more easygoing. He's more like Squidward, really difficult, complains a lot, doesn't like change. He would be low agreeableness. Here's the Dallas Cowboys quarterback. He threw a cup in the garbage can, but he missed it. He could have just left it on the ground, but instead he got up, picked it up, and threw it in the garbage. Would you say he's low conscientiousness or high conscientiousness? Right? I would say he's very high conscientiousness. He's the kind of guy who arrives early to practice every day. Okay? Let me tell you something. Basically, everybody on television is neurotic. Everybody. Otherwise, they would be too boring to be on TV. Every one of these characters on the show, How I Met Your Mother, is neurotic in some way. Now, occasionally you'll have somebody on television who's boring to make somebody else look more interesting. Marge Simpson tends to be pretty straight to make everyone else look more interesting. Okay? But generally, everybody on TV is high in neuroticism, meaning they have a lot of negative, obnoxious emotions. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this guy. He was on ads for a while. He's always traveling the world and trying new things, going to exotic places, speaking weird languages, eating weird foods. I would say he is high in openness to new experience. Someone who's low doesn't travel much. Someone who's low will only go on vacation to see their cousins rather than go somewhere interesting. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different way of living. All right, let's try some questions. Go ahead and read that. I'm not going to read it to you. The answer is, all right, so Juan has test anxiety. That's a negative emotion. So in this case, he's high in neuroticism. Okay, let's try another one. Read that. The answer is he scores high in agreeableness. Okay. Homer never eats food that he's never heard of. That's not true in The Simpsons, but it's just a question. So if you're not going to try new things, the answer is C. Low in openness to new experience. All right, Kimberly's a dependable person. She's always on time for work. How would she be described according to the five-factor model? The answer is she scores high in conscientiousness. A psychologist who classifies an individual's personality according to the person's manifestation of traits such as neuroticism, openness, and extroversion probably believes in which model of personality? Now, if you're thinking trait theory, that's good, but that's not what this question asked. The answer is the 5-factor model of personality. All right, go ahead and read this. The answer is, according to the 5-factor model, most personality traits can be derived from the 5 major traits of the theory. Duh, that's pretty much what the question said, but oh well. Moving right along. And if you got it wrong, sorry. It's just once you see the answer and it sounds like the question, it seems like, but I understand we all miss them every now and then, all the time. All right. The big 5 personality factors are based in which psychological perspective? The answer is trait psychology. If you're not on Edpuzzle, make sure you're hitting pause before I give you the answer. Okay. All right, here you go. Read it. The answer is stability. If you go to your class reunion, somebody will say, you haven't changed one bit. That's what they mean by stability. Your personality is stable. Now, I'll be honest with you. There are some traits that change as you get older. Conscientiousness does seem to go up when you get older. Agreeableness does seem to go down when you get older. So there are some slight changes as you get older. All right. Which of the following pieces of evidence would best support the validity of the big 5 personality traits? So this is a science question. This is typical of the AP psychology exam. You got to think like a scientist. Which one of these answers would support the validity of the big 5 personality traits? Meaning, are they any good? Are they worthwhile? The answer is B. If the big 5 seems to be consistent throughout many different countries, then that does support the validity. Doesn't matter your culture or your language or your religion, you still have a certain level of agreeableness, conscientiousness, openness to new experience. Psychologists who emphasize the importance of personality traits are most often criticized for what? All right, so what would you, if you wanted to tell off a trait theorist, what would you say to him? Like, you're wrong because, what would you say? The answer is D, situations. Remember what I said? Extrovert at work, introvert at home. It's not totally taking away their theory. It's just saying it's a knock against it. Okay. All right. This is not on the exam, but if you take a test and they give you vague results, and the results are so vague that they seem to apply to everyone, that's called the Barnum effect. Moving right along. All right. How do we measure personality? Okay. Well, all right. Write this down. Trait theorists use personality inventories like the Big 5, meaning they're not graded by a human, they're graded by a computer. They're objective, not subjective. However, projective tests are vague. They are not valid and they are not reliable. Projective tests are non-scientific. They're pretty much garbage, to be honest with you. But a projective test, supposedly, this is how it works. What you say what you see in the stimulus, like whether it's the ink blot or this picture. And whatever you say that you see, that reveals something about your unconscious mind. Okay? And that's why they are used by psychoanalysts. I'm going to talk about this on a different slide, but psychoanalysts are psychologists who believe that the unconscious mind is very important, the most important part of your mind. I'm not agreeing, I'm just telling you. All right, so write that down. Anyway, moving right along. I've never seen this on the test, but the MMPI is a personality inventory. It's good for finding out like who's a psychopath, who's got certain personality disorders. I don't know much about it, but it's not free, so I don't give it to my students. All right, you need to know what this is. TAT is how I'll say it, the Thematic Apperception Test. It's a projective test, meaning you look at a picture like this one and you tell a story. Give me a story about what you are seeing. Hit pause if you need to, but I'm going to go and show you the pictures. So, a TAT test, tell me a story. And whatever story that you tell illustrates something about your unconscious mind. Now, this is absolute garbage. This is old school, like 100 years ago. We don't do this anymore. Tell me a story. What's going on here? And whatever you say, supposedly, illustrates something about your personality. Tell me a story. Is he dead? Is he napping? Is she crying? Does she have something in her eye? Tell me a story. And whatever you say projects something about you onto the story. These are called thematic apperception test. Then there's the ink blot test. I don't want to talk a lot about it, but basically, Rorschach, good looking guy, by the way, he'd put like ink in the middle of this folded piece of paper, open it up and say, tell me what you see. And after a while, he standardized them. And this is absolute garbage. But the whole idea was that whatever you say that you see is supposedly a reflection of what's going on inside of you. This is all garbage. So what do you see when you see all of these? All right, let's do some questions. Tamika is completing a lengthy test in which she must indicate whether various written statements are true or false about herself. She is most likely taking the following. All right, the answer is it's not a projective test. That's like the ink blot or the TAT test. It's not an intelligence test or an achievement test. It's a personality inventory, like the Big Five. All right. All of the following are projective assessment techniques, except for the answer. So which one of these is not projective? In other words, which one of these is graded by a computer, not some weirdo with a clipboard? The answer is the Big Five. The Rorschach ink blot test and the TAT test are two popular forms of which of the following types of tests? The answer is projective test. Whatever you say that you see, you are like a projector. You're projecting something about you onto the test. You're like a video projector. You're projecting. All right. When a projective technique is used, a person could be asked to what? Think about the TAT test when you're doing this question. The answer is C. Look at some pictures and tell a story about each of them. TAT. All right. That's enough for right now. Thank you.